Where are you,
Okay.
Bhargavi? I can't see you.
Okay. So I'm starting. So we will today read about. I'll start.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Good. So good evening, everyone. We'll start with neuropsychology of learning and memory today. This is very nice picture about learning and memory. What we see in every household nowadays, mothers trying to keep our learnings in the kids' memory. Okay. So little bit about learning. Learning definition, if you want to know, these are the learning definitions. Learning is a process by which we acquire knowledge about the world. This is given by Eric Kandel. Kimball told that learning refers to more or less permanent change in behavior which occurs as a result of practice. Also, we can say that for working definition of learning, learning is the process of acquiring new information, whereas memory refers to the persistence of learning in a state that can be revealed at a later time. Means we learn something, that is learning, means new knowledge what we gain is learning, and old knowledge what we recall is memory. So according to Kandel, memory is a process by which the knowledge of the world is encoded, stored, and later retrieved. What we see, that we encode inside our mind, okay, this is tiger, this is lion. That is how you get the learning. Then it is stored. Yeah, tiger will be like this, lion will be like this. And later when you see the animal, you should make out, no, this is not lion, this is tiger, like that. So these are different types of memories. This I'll tell you in short because it is needed in the class further. So one is explicit memory and second is implicit memory. Explicit memory is conscious memory, like what you consciously try to remember. That is explicit memory. Implicit memory is not that you have to try to remember, it will just automatically come inside your memory. So in explicit memory, one is episodic memory. There, you remember some episodes of your life, like the day of your marriage, or the day when your child was born, or the day you went to the college, such important episodes of your life, what you remember. I mean, you try to remember. See, daily what is happening, you don't remember, but you remember each and every event, what happened on that specific day. So that comes with episodic memory. Next is semantic.
Dr. Anju, we can't hear you. Hello.
I think you I think you can hear me. You can't see me. My Wi-Fi has
We
gone.
lost your voice also. What I would suggest, you see these three icons next to your presentation. नीचे देखिए 60.
No. Actually, my presentation laptop Wi-Fi had gone. So you can hear me. You can't see me. Just a minute. I'll start the presentation.
No, we can see your presentation also. What I'm saying कि आप ना छोटे वाले में कर रहे हो, जो screen है.
हाँ, presentation.
What you do is, वो नीचे.
I'll do the present. I understand. Episodic memory. Second is semantic memory. Say episodic memory is like autobiographical memory. What you write in autobiography is not your daily day-to-day routine activities, but some special days what you remember that you write in your autobiography. Like people who were in America, they always remember the 9/11 days, what I was doing on that day and those things. So these comes in episodic memory, whereas semantic memory is general knowledge. You know that ki, earth is round, giraffe is tall, tiger is striped, road is like going till there. Those things comes in semantic memory. Then there is implicit memory. These are unconsciously you are knowing these things. Like you know how to brush your teeth. You don't have to consciously remember how to brush your teeth. You know how to ride a bicycle because you are doing it since long. So these different types, depending on how you have seen. That is That is implicit memory. In implicit memory also, there are different types of memory depending on the habituation. Like daily you are doing, so you know. Some things are you do according to what, like it is 1 o'clock, now you are hungry. If you didn't know that it is 1 o'clock, you may not be hungry, like that. So these all comes in implicit memory. Just a minute, I'll launch the presentation again. Can you see my presentation?
No.
My Wi-Fi is coming and going. Then we'll go for, now we will go for neuroscience of these memory things. Different type of memory, I hope you can understand, because these we are going to further talk about this. So you should remember what is explicit memory, what is implicit. Again, these memories, what I'm talking about, explicit and implicit, these are long-term memories, not short-term memories. Short-term memories are like 1 day, few minutes and few hours, what you remember, that is short-term memory. What I am talking is long-term memory. So in long-term memory, we have this explicit, implicit and all those things, not in short-term memory. My presentation is not coming, sorry. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, can you mail the presentation to somebody so that they can show it and you can talk, ma'am?
Presentation is in computer Wi-Fi is not working.
Okay. Okay.
So just a minute, I'll try again. Yeah, so different type of memory, these are long-term memories. So now we'll go for,
Yes, it's
yeah. So learning and memory can be subdivided into major hypothetical stages like encoding, storage, and retrieval, which I think we have learned already in the previous classes, whoever Nasima might have taken. So we will not go in detail of this. How this happens in our brain, that we'll see today. That is neuroscience of the learning and memory. How what you are seeing, how you learn about that, and how you remember it for long term. That is called neuroscience of learning and memory, and where in the brain these all things are happening. So encoding and all, we will not go in detail. So how we learn about what is happening in our brain when we try to learn and memorize something. There are 3 ways how we go for this learning. One is through case studies. We see some patients, for some means more number of patients, to find out about after amnesia what is retained and what is not retained in their brain. So this is one way, by doing the case study. Second is by doing the animal models of memory in simple animals, and then in complex animals like in monkeys and all. And third is by brain imaging like MRI, CT scan, PET scan, all those scans, EEG, these all things. So these are 3 methods how we find out about what is happening inside the brain when you are trying to learn and memorize things. So amnesia means a deficit in the memory as a function of brain damage. It can be damaged due to some injury or due to some disease or some psychological trauma, means shock. So it can be involved either the inability to learn new things or what we have already learned to forget those things. These can cause the amnesia. Depending on that, there are different types of amnesia. One is retrograde amnesia, means what is retrograde means going back. So what you have learned previously that you will forget, that is retrograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia means what you have learned already that you will remember, but from today onwards, what is happening that you will not remember in long-term memory. Again, we are talking about long-term memory. Never forget that. We are not talking about short-term memory. We are only talking about long-term memory in the learning and memory, because what we learn that has to retain till long term. So one is by this I wanted to tell you. This is the basic structure of brain. So this yellow thing or orange thing, whatever you call it, this is frontal cortex of the brain. This blue thing is called parietal cortex. Green thing is occipital, and this nice beautiful color is the temporal lobe. So these are different lobes of the brain, and this is cerebellum. So these all things are called cerebrum, cerebral cortex or cerebrum, and this is cerebellum. Here will be the brain stem. This is brain stem which goes continuation with the spinal cord in the backbone of your body. So the short-term memories basically works with this frontal, parietal, and occipital. These three things are responsible for short-term memories: frontal, parietal, and occipital. Whereas temporal, this purple, beautiful lavender color, this temporal lobe is responsible for long-term memory. In this temporal lobe also, there are different areas responsible for different types of memories. What I told last that time, explicit, implicit, another different types of memories is. So now I'll tell you some words which you should understand. Anterior. Anterior means front. Posterior means back. Medial means related to the center part of our body. Like the heart is medial in our body, whereas fingers are distal in our body. Okay. So anterior means front, posterior means back, medial means towards the center part of the body, that lateral means towards away from the body, and like fingers and all those things. And then dorsal means towards the back of the body, ventral means towards the front of the body. I hope I'm understandable these things. So this temporal lobe also, in this different parts will have different type of work in the memory. So some will be anterior, means in the front of the lobe. Some will be posterior. This is the posterior part of the temporal lobe. Then lateral. Lateral means this is outer part of the lobe. And medial when we talk, that we are not seeing in this picture because that will be in the center part of the brain. This is another photo for the brain. So this is again this cerebrum. This whole thing is cerebrum, which was divided now colorful in the previous picture. This is cerebellum, this is brainstem, and this is continuing with the spinal cord. Again, this here ventricles. Ventricles are the fluid filled spaces which is connected with your ear. That's why your ear is important for equilibrium. If you try to see, if you fold your head one side and you try to walk straight, you cannot do that because this fluid will go towards one side, then your equilibrium will be lost. So these are ventricles. So now we will talk about the three methods how we know about the neuroscience of the memory. So one is by the case history. So in case history, what they used to do, they used to study the people who already have amnesia, or they used to cause some type of damage, not in human, obviously, in animals, in some part of the brain, and to find out that that part of brain is important for memory loss or not. So different type of surgeries, what they used to do is like corpus callosotomy, different types. amygdala, removing the amygdala, removing the some part of the temporal lobe. Different types of surgeries they do, like removing the uncus. There are so many places in the brain. You don't need to remember so many places. Okay, removing the thalamus, removing hypothalamus, removing hippocampus. These are different. Removing pons, medulla. So one case history which is written in our book and which is very good is the case history of one patient, HM. So HM was a patient of epilepsy. Okay, he was always having fits. So his main problem was fits, not any other memory problem. So his main problem was fits. So to treat the fits, seizures, what they do that they removed the medial part of the lobe. Again, medial means towards the center of the body. The temporal lobe, you remember, both sides above your ears is the temporal lobe. So they removed the center part of the temporal lobe to treat his seizures. So after that, what happened? The surgery was a success. His fits were controlled. But after 1.5 years of the surgery, they saw that new long-term memories were not forming. He remembered what all happened before his surgery. But what is happening after surgery, that long-term memory was not forming. Means he forgot that his age was 28 years. He was still thinking that he is 26 years. He was 26 years at the time of surgery. And after that, whatever was happening, that was not forming in long-term memory. Only short-term he was remembering, but long-term memory was not forming. So they understood that this medial part of temporal lobe must be associated with formation of the long-term memories. So this is one case history which is written in our book and which is like quite frequently in further also in book it is told about this. So now we have come to one place which is medial part of temporal lobe. That this is related with the memory, long-term memory, sensory and working memory. So if we remove the medial part of the temporal lobe, there is high chance of severe and permanent inability to remove to get new memories, new learning and memory. Means whatever has happened before that he can remember, but new learning and retaining of the memory may not happen. So in the central medial temporal areas, there are the amygdala, hippocampus, entorhinal cortex, and parahippocampus and perirhinal cortical areas. I don't know how much you will remember. You remember this amygdala and hippocampus. These two things are important. Entorhinal, if you can, it is good to remember. Other things, no need to remember. You remember that center part of the temporal lobe, which is called medial temporal lobe, which contains amygdala and hippocampus. Okay. So when the medial temporal lobe was removed, the amygdala and hippocampus was removed along with these all things, what is written here. Okay. I don't think this photo is much used because here medial part of temporal lobe is not seen. It is only the lateral part of temporal lobe seen. But anyway, these were the things which are removed in patient HM. Okay. So now we know that anterograde amnesia, I told about 2 types of amnesia. So anterograde amnesia happened in case of HM when the medial part of temporal lobe was removed. Okay. Now come to another patient because we are talking about the first type of learning of the neuroscience of memory, that is by case history. So another patient is RB. He had ischemic episode. Means the blood supply to the brain suddenly stopped during his bypass surgery. So when he was undergoing bypass surgery, that time bypass, you understood that heart was being surgery done on the heart. So at that time, the blood supply to the brain stopped for that period during the surgery was going on. So the blood supply stopped. So by that time, the brain, that area where the blood supply totally stopped, that area died. All the cells of that area died. So he also got dense anterograde amnesia. Same like HM. HM also was remembering previous thing, but new memories was not happening. So after RB died, obviously he must be heart disease patient. He got and bypass. He might have died early. So after he died, his brain was given for autopsy and studies. So when study was seen, so it was seen that the problem happened in hippocampus, because that time I told you in HM there were so many areas which were removed, but basically the problem was because of hippocampus. So you see the condition of the RB. He could remember all previous things, but not new things, anterograde amnesia. So now we have pinpointed that time. That time we thought that these all things are removed, then only the problem happened with HM. But now we have pinpointed that the problem was with inside the hippocampus, and that too in the CA1 pyramidal cells only. So now at least we know that hippocampus is crucial in forming the new long-term memories. New long-term memories, what is already there will be there already, but new long-term memories will be formed in hippocampus. I remember one song, भूल गया सब कुछ याद नहीं अब कुछ बस यही बात नहीं भूली जूली. Why? Because Julie was formed in hippocampus. So he forgot all other things which are coming afterwards, but Julie was already formed earlier, so he remembered Julie. Other things he forgot. Good. So now you can remember that Julie was not in hippocampus. Julie might be in amygdala, and all other his memories, like office memories, might be in hippocampus. That's why he forgot. Okay. So memories are solidified in long-term stores over days, weeks, months, and years. So this process is known as consolidation. And this hippocampus, what does? This hippocampus is crucial for consolidation of information. So unless there will be consolidation, there can't be the formation of memory in long term. So it is not the storage of the hippocampus is not the storage of the memory. It only works in the consolidation of information. This consolidation strengthens the association with the multiple stimulus inputs. Means multiple things you see and together you form a concept about that thing. That concept formation is happening in hippocampus. This coordinates the multiple information. Like tiger, you see one tiger, there will be 4 legs, there will be one tail, there will be stripes of yellow and black, and that is a wild animal, there will be big canines. These all information separately you are getting, together they are consolidated and they are associated with each other in hippocampus. So, okay, so that's why hippocampus is helping in the hypothesizing the coordinate this strengthening of the consolidation. But that effects are take place in the neocortex. Okay, now what is neocortex? So cortex, the brain, all these round organs in our body, they have the outer area called cortex, and inner, the center part will be medulla. Medulla, you remember medulla oblongata. So same way, center part will be medulla. Outer, whatever we saw, the parietal, gyroidal, these are all cortex. In the cortex, the outermost layer, which is just below our skull, is called neocortex. There are some 6-7 layers of those cells. This is called neocortex, and below that means in the center part of the ball will be allocortex. So what we are talking, this memory takes place in the neocortex, means near the skull, means outer part of the temporal lobe, or whatever outer part of the brain, whatever structure we are talking about, their outer part means neocortex is the main place where these all things are happening. So now come to alcoholic-Korsakoff syndromes or Wernicke's encephalopathy. So what happens to this? Wernicke's encephalopathy is there will be damage to hypothalamus, medulla, thalamus, mammillary bodies, brainstem, these all places means brain, thalamus, hypothalamus, these all things, they get damaged because of vitamin B1 deficiency, means thiamine deficiency. I think if you remember in your school time, in your 10th or 11th, we were taught that vitamin B1 deficiency causes there were one long list. Vitamin C deficiency causes scurvy, vitamin D causes rickets. I think you remember, some of you. So vitamin B1
remember.
deficiency. Yeah.
I remember.
Good. Yeah. So that so vitamin B1 deficiency in brain causes Wernicke's encephalopathy. And when this vitamin B deficiency is caused by alcohol abuse, when you drink lots of alcohol, the vitamin B absorption in your body reduces. So when the vitamin B1 deficiency is due to alcohol, then it is called Korsakoff syndrome. So means Wernicke's encephalopathy is happening secondary to Korsakoff syndrome. Okay. So basically both are not two different things. But Wernicke's encephalopathy will not occur only because of Korsakoff syndrome, but Korsakoff syndrome will cause Wernicke's encephalopathy. But Wernicke's encephalopathy can occur due to other causes also, like because of nutritional lack of vitamin B1, or there is malabsorption syndrome. So even if you're taking lots of vitamin B1, but it's not getting absorbed inside your digestive system, or other causes, like you are taking something which is opposite to the vitamin B1, the multiple causes. So any cause of vitamin B1 deficiency can cause Wernicke's encephalopathy. But if the cause is alcohol, then it is called Korsakoff syndrome. Clear? So both are not two different things, but they are related to each other.
I have
So
a
what
question.
happens? Yeah.
Dr. Anju, I have a question. So this Wernicke encephalopathy, it causes long-term memory loss in the
it causes the damage to diencephalon. So that causes the amnesia.
Okay. Which part of the brain does it affect though? Is it the same?
Again, center part of the brain. These parts I've written: hypothalamus, medulla, thalamus, mammillary bodies, brainstem. These are the parts which gets damaged because of the vitamin B1 deficiency.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're moving away from the temporal lobe and the hippocampus now. We're doing other parts damaged.
No, these parts are just beside the temporal lobe. It is just in the center part only.
Okay, sure. Okay.
There is one photo here. You can see. Here is the whole brain, and this is cut section of the brain. So you see that this is temporal lobe, what I told, right? And when you cut that, here is the part what you can see: hypothalamus, thalamus. Okay. Medulla. These all things are here. So this gets damaged because of vitamin B1 deficiency in cases of Wernicke's encephalopathy. So that's why it causes long-term memory loss.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
So this is the one which goes down and becomes the spine stem.
No, that is brainstem. Brainstem is here.
Brainstem. I mean, from there it goes down to the brainstem and becomes the spine.
This whole part, depending on the situation, if it is mild Wernicke's encephalopathy, only small part will be affected. Like amygdala is here. You can see this is hippocampus. This is amygdala. So small part will be, if it is severe Wernicke's encephalopathy, then around so many places will be damaged. It can go up to brainstem also. If it goes from brainstem and to spinal cord, then there will be difficulty in sensory and motor also. But we are not going to that level, because right now we are talking only about the memory. Okay. So basically it starts from this part. This is amygdala, this red part. So this gets problem. First, it gets damaged. Along with that, if severe conditions, whole area can get damaged. There will be different kinds of problems, like your vision will be problem, walking will be problem in Wernicke's encephalopathy. So that is Korsakoff Wernicke's encephalopathy syndrome. Okay. Now talking about, so right now we talked about the medial part of the temporal lobe, right? So now we'll go to other part of the temporal lobe and how it affects the memory. So next is anterior and lateral part of the temporal lobe. Anterior part, again I told, the front part of the temporal lobe. Lateral part means the outer part of the temporal lobe. Now we talked about the center part of the temporal lobe. which I showed in this cut section. Now we'll talk about this outer part. So what happens? The lesion that damage the lateral part of the temporal lobe, they also can cause the, again I told you, neocortex. Neocortex is the outer part of the temporal lobe now. So neocortex is crucial for the storage of memories. So it is seen that retrograde amnesia is seen in case of neocortex damage. That time I talked about anterograde amnesia, means old memories are not lost, but new memories are not formed. Here we are talking about retrograde amnesia, means you will lose or old memories if you get the damage in the anterior and the lateral outer part of the temporal lobe.
So, Dr. Anju, so the memories are forgotten prior to all the memories prior to the
damage. Yeah, that is, yeah.
But you can carry on forming new memories, long-term.
No, yeah, it depends. If it is medial lobe is not involved, then anterograde amnesia will not happen. Only old memories will lose, but new memories can form.
Okay.
Doctor, just a question.
Yeah.
In diencephalonic amnesia also it's the same, right? The retrograde, you forget all the old things, or how is it?
It is anterograde depending on again the lesion. If the damage extends towards lateral also, you can get both retrograde and anterograde. Otherwise, if only in the center part it is lost, then anterograde amnesia.
Okay.
Okay. Because that is a disease. Wernicke's encephalopathy is a disease. So mild conditions will be there, severe conditions will be there. Okay. So this can happen. So this anterior and lateral temporal lobe loss can happen age-wise also. If you are getting old, slowly the neurons of the outer part of the brain, like neocortex, what I told, that gets lost because of age. They start dying because of age. So that we see in Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease, you start forgetting your old memories, right? Progressive neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, or it can be because of some infections like herpes simplex encephalitis. In such cases also, there will be loss because of the this anterior and lateral temporal lobe neuron loss. So they can still form new long-term memories. They can still form new long-term memories. So there is no anterograde amnesia, but there will be isolated retrograde amnesia. Only old memories will be lost, but new memories will be forming, especially in the damage of the anterior temporal lobe. Okay. So now we can say that lateral and anterior regions of the temporal lobe are the sites of storage of long-term declarative memories, which is old memories, our childhood memories and all those things. So so we can say that it is not at one stage. In the recent studies, it is seen that these memories are stored not at one place. They are scattered throughout the neocortex in the different areas, like visual areas only. You can have memories of visual memories. Auditory area only, you will remember the auditory memory, like 1950 songs and all those things, or something like that. So it is spread. The memories are spread in different part of the neocortex. Neocortex, again, you should not forget, neocortex is the most outer part of your cerebrum, which is just below the skull.
Doctor, what is the cortex then? The neocortex is the outermost part. The cortex is same.
Cortex, the neocortex is a part of cortex.
Okay. What does the cortex also include apart from the neocortex?
Allocortex. Outer part is neocortex. 6-7 layers of the cells is neocortex. Below that is allocortex. Below that is medulla. It will be same in cases of brain, in cases of kidney, in cases of ovary, testis. Everywhere structure is same. Outer part will be cortex. Center part will be medulla.
Okay, understood.
Okay. So these memories are stored as distributed representations, means where you want to, what type of memory it is, accordingly, it is throughout the neocortex, it is distributed. And the medial temporal lobe, what we talked earlier in cases of HM and RB, those are responsible for consolidation. Hippocampus is the responsible for consolidation of this information, over time. So now second method, first method was case study, that we finished. Now second method is animal models of memory. So animal models of memory we do in cases of monkeys, because monkeys are most close to human, but still even monkeys are most close to human, but still they are not actually quite similar to human, but still we do on monkeys only. So here in monkeys it is seen that lesion to the hippocampus and surrounding structures, they cause problem in the learning only. So obviously if learning will not happen, so the memory will also not form. So the Mortimer Mishkin, he did the research in National Institute of Mental Health, and he removed the hippocampus and the amygdala in the monkey. So he was seen that there is too much of a problem after that. But too much of problem. So then it is seen that amygdala is also very important structure in memory, because memory was totally lost when the hippocampus and amygdala was removed.
Can I say something about this experiment, Dr. Anju?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I took this session last time, and I also shared one video wherein this Dr. Mishkin is he has a monkey and he's trying to show him, let's take an, I don't remember what he was doing. Let's say the experimenter has a banana. So he keeps two places and he tell monkey to choose one of it. So what happens in the beginning, monkey does make mistake, but then he understands the pattern of the experimenter, and then he started choosing the same place and same banana. So he got the idea of how to get that. So that means he used his brain, and then what he did, he actually removed the hippocampus and amygdala of the same monkey, and then did the same experiment. And every time the monkey could not able to figure out where the banana is. So this is how he concluded that hippocampus and amygdala, hippocampus is the reason and amygdala is the reason why the memory get affected. Because as you said, hippocampus is something which help us or help a person or animal to consolidate memory or create concept. So hippocampus was removed, the concept was removed from the monkey in one way. So that was the story.
Yeah, hippocampus is for consolidation and amygdala for storage. So when only hippocampus was removed, then the memory was lost, obviously. When hippocampus and amygdala both were removed, then the severe cases of amnesia was formed. So then it is proving that amygdala for storage of the memory. So same way, another people also did the, what is the name? Stuart Zola, yeah. Zola also did something like this only in California. Stuart Zola and colleagues, they did specific chota surgeries between the amygdala and hippocampus, and they caused the lesion in amygdala separately, and in some monkeys in hippocampus separately, in the entorhinal cortex in some monkeys, and surrounding neocortex in the parahippocampus. You don't need to remember these all words. It's okay. Parahippocampus you can remember. Gyrus and sulci are different thing, which is like valley and mountains kind of thing in the brain. What you see, that is gyrus and sulci. So we can see that lesions restricted to the hippocampus, they did not produce the severe form of amnesia. But if along with that, other structures, surrounding structures were also improved, were also removed, then it causes severe kind of you can see that hippocampus system in the medial temporal lobe and the associated cortex is critical for forming long-term memories. The amygdala is not a crucial part of the system for episodic memory, but it is important for emotional memory. Okay. And the medial temporal lobe is not essential for short-term or working memory processes. And medial temporal lobe is a key component in organizing and consolidating long-term memory that is permanently stored in a distributed fashion in the neocortex. These are the things which they came to know after doing all the surgeries on the animals. Like hippocampus causes the consolidation. Amygdala is not for episodic memory, but most for emotional memory. When it is emotionally attached with you, then you will store that memory in amygdala. Medial temporal is not essential for short term. Again, I told you short term memory, basically we go for frontal, parietal, occipital lobe. And medial temporal is a key component in organizing and consolidating, which is happening in the hippocampus. And then permanently they are stored in distributed fashion in the neocortex according to the what kind of it is the memory it is. Now the third part. First part was case series, which we saw in the RB and HM. Second was how to learn about neuroscience of memory by animals. Third is by imaging the human brain and memory. So when the episodic encoding and retrieval, for this the test was done. There are various tests done for different kind of memories, like PET, MRI, CT scan. There are so many types of tests which is done on the brain, EEG. So it is seen that in episodic type of memory, to know whether the hippocampus becomes active when encoding new information, the James, these all people, James Haxby, Leslie, Unger, Leader, oh my God, and their colleagues, they did the test, PET scan on the people who are trying to do the episodic recall of the memory. I hope you remember what is episodic recall of memory. Remembering that bad day when you got married. Yeah, such kind of episodic memories when they were recalling. That time they did the PET scan and the PET, positron emission tomography. It is similar to the CT scan, but in CT scan, X-rays are thrown on the body. In PET scan, positrons are thrown on the body. So it is positron emission tomography. So they saw that there are changes in the regional blood flow where more activity is happening. So the hippocampus region was activated during encoding of the face, encoding, but not during recognition, and where the retrieval processes should have been engaged. So this formed that medial temporal lobe damage. Again, we are again going to the same confirmation that medial temporal lobe damage leads to anterograde amnesia, but preserves the distant retrograde memories. You will remember your childhood memory, but you will not remember further what is going to happen. So again, what we learned from the previous case studies and all, again, we are confirming our finding by doing this scan that we support that hippocampus role in the memory is very important. Now, this is one important thing which was seen in the PET, that the right hippocampus region was activated during encoding of the face, but not during recognition. And encoding also activated the left prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal, frontal, I told you, in the front, on your forehead, just below that cortex. Whereas recognition activated the right prefrontal. Encoding causes left prefrontal. Recognition activated the right prefrontal cortex. So there is this laterality thing they learned by doing this scan. They came to know that encoding causes the activation of left prefrontal, whereas the recognition activated the right prefrontal cortex. So this they came to know by doing this imaging technique. So now we know that if one side is damaged, then encoding will be problem. If other side is damaged, then recognition will be the problem, but encoding will not be the problem. So this is called HERA, hemispheric encoding retrieval asymmetry. Means if one side is problem, there's only one problem. One problem will happen if one side is damaged. If If left side is damaged, then encoding will be problem. If right side is damaged, retrieval will be the problem. So hemispheric encoding, retrieval asymmetry. This happened by doing the this PT they came to know. Now this Wagner and his colleagues in MIT Harvard, they did MRI. They did MRI on the subjects. Again, doing giving them items for recognition and all items and subjects they gave, and they did the MRI of the brain while doing that. So they saw that event-related responses, were larger in prefrontal, again behind your forehead. In the event-related responses were more in prefrontal and medial temporal region during encodings of words and pictures. Okay, you are understanding? The event-related responses are more in prefrontal, and words and pictures are more in medial temporal regions in the parahippocampal cortex area. So one is by PT scan, you came to know about the hemispheric asymmetric HERA. By doing the MRI scan, the Wagner came to know that the event-related responses are more in prefrontal, whereas the words and picture-related memories are more in medial temporal region. Okay. Next comes the semantic type of memory and what they did. So semantic retrieval involves the left prefrontal cortex. This region includes the Broca's area 44, 46. Here you can see 44, here it is 46. These areas are involved in cases of semantic memory. You remember semantic memory, that is general knowledge of the world. So these things are studied by doing the functional neuroimaging techniques, and we came to know that semantic memories are in left prefrontal cortex, Broca's area, and the ventral lateral region 44, 45, 46, these all areas. Okay. Like knowledge of animate and inanimate objects are localized in again different cortical regions. This is about the semantic memory. Now is procedural memory. Means procedural memories you are doing daily, so you know. Semantic memory, I told you, general knowledge of the word. Procedural memory means you know. When you sit in the car, you don't consciously remember how to drive the car. You just drive. You do. That's why you know. When you take your brush, you don't know how. You don't consciously recall how to brush your teeth. You just do it because you are doing, so you know it. So that is called procedural memory. So this comes stimulus sequence. Okay. These are basis of the procedural motor learning. Means your muscles already know, they know that which muscle should get activated to do which work. And this is happening in the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia bilaterally, both sides. So brain areas and limb movements. Accordingly, the muscles which are going to work for that particular task, they automatically get activated. This is called motor cortex activation. Activation of motor cortex. So that particular muscles, they get activated automatically by doing the procedural memory. So this memory is not only in the brain areas, they are also in the periphery, in the muscles also, where those areas of the brain which is controlling those finger movements. When you do painting, this is habitually you are doing. When you wash the vessels, like those things, you don't need to consciously remember. So these kinds of procedural memory is happening in the basal ganglia and mainly in the motor area of the left hemisphere. Okay. And accordingly, which muscles are going to activate, accordingly that kind of motor cortex gets activated. Like parietal cortex, some places of parietal cortex, sometimes prefrontal cortex. Accordingly, where it is happening, accordingly, even in occiput, putamen, everywhere it can get activated. What muscle is going to activate, accordingly, it can get activated in the whole cortex anywhere, not necessarily the temporal lobe. Now we are talking about everywhere. Okay. Now is the perceptual priming and implicit and explicit memory. So Daniel and his colleagues at Harvard University, they investigated the neural basis of the perceptual priming, means implicit memory. Implicit memory for like your day-to-day activities and associations memory. Like when you say Hrithik Roshan, you will automatically remember ki, haan, that smart guy with 6 fingers. That is association memory, associated implicit memory. So same way, they studied the neural basis by PET study. They concluded that implicit and explicit retrieval of information is served by separate brain systems. So in summary, neuroimaging, in summary, we can say that neuroimaging studies have demonstrated patterns of neuronal activation that are consistent with memory systems derived from cognitive research. 1. Cognitive research in the patients of amnesia. Second is studies in human cognitive research, studies in human amnesic animal models, and third is neuroimaging. First we do the research and the human amnesic study and animal models, and then we confirm it by the neuroimaging surgery. So there are 3 types of things which we do to know about the neuroscience of the memory. Okay, it is clear till now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Anju.
Okay, so now we'll go to little smaller things. Now we were in the areas of the brain. Now we'll go even smaller. In each area there are neurons. Whole brain is formed of neurons. So we can say that neuron is the basic unit of the brain. So neurons, now we go to cellular level. We were at the organ level. Now we are at cellular level. So cellular means the cells are neurons. The cells of the brain is called neurons. So these neurons, now what happens in these areas, what all areas we have learned about hippocampus, amygdala, medial temporal, lateral. In these areas, what is happening? How is the memory forming at very small level? So there are 2 types of synaptic interactions seen. One is Hep's rule, and second is long-term potentiation. There are 2 types of synapses. Bole to neuron is one cell with multiple finger-like structures. These are dendrites. These dendrites attach with the fellow neurons. See here, this is neuron. This is axon. So these neurons, axons, see, this is talking with the fellow neurons, and that's how the structures, they communicate with each other, so that the learning or memory is transferred from one neuron to other neuron. Consolidation and storage is forming like this. So the Hebb rule says that when the axon of cell A, this is cell A, means neuron A, which excites the cell B. This is second cell B, second neuron, B neuron. So it excites the B neuron repeatedly and persistently. So some growth process of metabolic changes, not in one neuron, but in both. So that A ka efficiency will increase. So it will fire the B more. This is Hebb's rule. Means synapses means relationship. The relationship between 2 neurons, if it is repeatedly activated at about the same time, then both sides, A and B, both sides, the structure of the chemistry changes in both sides, and the relationship will strengthen. Okay, so this is Hebb's rule. Now about the long-term potentiation. This is the second way of cellular changes in the neurons for memory formation. So here is neural circuits in the hippocampus that are subjected to repeated intense electricity stimulus. They develop the hippocampal cells that become more sensitive to stimuli. Matlab, if you give repeated chota electrical shock, if you give to some cells and you keep on giving it, then it becomes more sensitive. After that, chota stimuli also comes and it becomes activated. If you keep on giving repeated habituation of the cell, you can say that you are giving the chota electric shock. If you keep on giving very frequently, I mean too many times, then next time that comes in the memory of the cell. Memory will remember this electric stimuli. So that will cause next time when so many times if you see the same face. Suppose you would see so many times this your family member's face, because you are seeing so many times, means same stimuli is coming so many times. So after that, even if you see a jhalak, means just a glance, then also you will recognize immediately. Now it is clear. So that is long-term potentiation. Now you will see that there is not only chemical but also electrical stimulation. There is chemical stimulation and then there is electrical stimulation. So when we say that dimag ki batti jala de, so it's not totally wrong, because you can burn the tube light in your dimag because there is electricity already in the dimag. Very nice. Brain is having electricity. Thank God we don't have to pay the bill. That's why these ideas are shown with bulbs, because there is electricity in your mind which causes the one neuron to go to another neuron. So how this LTP, means long-term potentiation, happens? Now it is the chemical level I'm telling. Electrical level you understood. Now I'm coming to chemical level. So chemical, there are doubly gated N-methyl D-aspartate receptors on the cells. I have one photo. You should not get scared. I'll show you if you don't get scared. I hope you don't get scared seeing this photo. So these are doubly gated. These receptors are there. Okay. This is the axon of, this is the dendrite of one cell. This is the neuron of another cell. Motor neuron this is, and this is dendrite of sensory neuron. Okay. Don't worry about much. So these are the cells. So doubly gated NMDA receptors are there on the dendritic spines of postsynaptic neurons, means second neuron, neuron B. There are these receptors, and the glutamate is the excitatory transmitter in hippocampus for these receptors. Okay. So now what happens if we give something which interacts with glutamate, like anti-glutamate or pro-glutamate? If we give something, then these receptors will change, right? So by changing these receptors, you can change the memory. You can change the learning and memory. So glutamate is the major excitatory transmitters in the hippocampus working on these receptors, NMDA receptors and non-NMDA receptors. So if you disrupt by giving anti-glutamate or pro-glutamate, then you will disrupt the learning and memory. So chemically, you can block the long-term potentiation in the hippocampus by giving some drugs which will work on glutamate. You don't even need to work on NMDA. You don't need to work on hippocampus. Nowhere. Such a small thing. Just you give anti-glutamate. When glutamate will not be there, NMDA receptors will not work. Then the last neuron A will not talk with neuron B, because neuron B will close its gate for neuron A. So there won't be any relationship. You cannot make the new learning and new memory. Okay. So these things can be done by giving glutamate ka drug, anti-glutamate or excessive glutamate, or some change in the glutamate, or you can genetically manipulate so that body stops forming glutamate. Okay. So you can give some drug which causes problem with glutamate, or you can do the genetic manipulation, which causes problem with glutamate. That way, you can block the cascade of molecular triggering for long-term potentiation. So this will impair the spatial learning. You will forget where you are. So that causes the memory loss in people who don't understand. They are not oriented with the time and place. They don't understand where am I, what time it is. That spatial learning will be blocked. Okay, it is so simple to understand. I hope it is clear.
Dr. Anju, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to give drugs to?
No, you don't want to give that drug. This is for doing the research work. Whether this glutamate and other these molecules, these chemicals are working or not.
Oh, I see. Okay.
No, in case there is some illness and there are some medication, the side effect could also be the glutamate,
Yeah, actually glutamate is just one example I'm telling. There are so many chemical receptors working like that. Glutamate is just one example out of the so many are there. These many things are there. You can work on any one thing. CMP, any one place you do one and just it gets disrupted there. So anywhere if you are going for some drug or even if like normal food, if somewhere it gets blocked, your amnesia can happen. That's what I wanted to tell. The glutamate is like one chemical, but there are so many thousands of that. So there are so many causes for amnesia. This is chemical related.
And it's mostly because happens for anterograde amnesia, right? It's not for retrograde amnesia.
It can be for both, depending on the which structure. Now, what is this example? What I told, this glutamate wala, this is in hippocampus. So hippocampus will cause ambrogade. It's a this is one example. That's just one example. If the same thing is these receptors thing and chemical transmitters things are there everywhere. If they are happening in neocortex, then there will be problem with retrograde amnesia also.
Okay, even retrieval will become a problem. Correct.
Yes, retrieval, consolidation, anything can become problem depending on where is the problem. I mean, which chemical or which neuron is getting affected.
Right.
Okay. So this is over, class is over. This is one summary that different form of learning are affected differentially by lesions in different locations. Now you are clear that all different type of memories are in different places in the brain. Not all the kind of memory is in some same place. If there is parahippocampus or perirenal, entorhinal cortex in this brain, there will be memory storage problem for object recognition. Same way, here will be there dentate, gyrus, hippocampus. These are separate, different lesions. If lesion is happening in this area, then that kind of memory will be lost. If lesion is happening in different areas, then different kind of memory will be lost. Okay, I think it is clear now.
Superb. All clear.
Awesome, awesome. Very nice class. Excellent.
Yeah.
Ritika, you want to switch off the recording?
Yeah.